Move your big ass off that porch before we drag you down, Sheriff Dalton Kearns barked, loud enough for every body cam to catch it. You don't look like a landowner. You look like a liability. Riot helmets shifted in unison, boots grinding into Elijah Boone's red dirt. Rifles angled toward his barn, like he was stockpiling weapons instead of hay. A uniformed officer smirked as he kicked over a feed bucket. Another moved toward the kennel. Kearns stepped closer, badge glinting inches from Elijah's chest. Federal seizure. This property isn't yours anymore. Elijah's broad hands held steady on the folder of deeds. His overalls strained. His expression didn't. Sheriff Kearns had just surrounded a man trained to dismantle hostile territory. Without realizing, he was standing inside it. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Elijah Boone's farmland, as the first rumble of engines disturbed the Georgia quiet. He stood on his weathered porch, work-worn overalls hanging loose on his heavy frame, watching armored county trucks kick up dust along his dirt road. His heart beat steady and slow, each breath measured as decades of training took over. Sheriff Dalton Kearns emerged from the lead vehicle, his badge gleaming against his tactical vest. Behind him, deputies poured out in formation, riot gear clattering. 50 men with rifles raised, spreading across the property like a dark flood. "Elijah Boone!" Kearns's voice boomed through a megaphone, dripping with contempt. "This is a federal seizure order. Step off the porch with your hands visible." Elijah didn't move, just watched as deputies took positions behind his rusty tractor, along the split-rail fence, near the chicken coop where his hens had fallen silent. "Look at this sorry excuse for a farmer," Kearns sneered through the megaphone. "Too fat and lazy to even respond to a lawful order. This ain't your land anymore, boy. Prime Georgia soil don't belong to squatters and criminals." From the neighboring property, Ruth Ann Carter's screen door slammed. The elderly woman hobbled onto her porch, cell phone raised high. "I'm recording everything, Dalton Kearns. The whole world's gonna see this." "Mrs. Carter, return to your home immediately," Kearns barked. "This is an official law enforcement operation." "Like hell it is!" Ruth Ann's fingers flew across her phone screen. "I'm live streaming right now. 300 people already watching." Elijah's eyes moved methodically across the scene, noting each tactical flaw. The deputies bunched too closely near the barn's blind spots. Their communication channels overlapped sloppily. The younger ones gripped their weapons with visible tension, betraying their inexperience. Deputy Kyle Mercer shifted uncomfortably at his position near the front line. His gear was newer than the others, his movements less practiced. Fresh recruit, Elijah assessed, still capable of doubt. With deliberate slowness, Elijah reached into his overall pocket. Several deputies jerked their rifles higher. "Easy now," he called out, voice deep and calm. "Just getting my paperwork." He withdrew a thick manila envelope, holding it up for all to see. Property deeds, tax records, all notarized and current. He descended the porch steps with measured steps, each foot placed carefully. His size made him appear slow, clumsy, but his movements held the fluid economy of a predator playing wounded. "Your warrant's false, Sheriff," Elijah stated, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "Filed under Federal Statute 18724, which was repealed last year. Every officer here is currently participating in an illegal seizure." Deputy Mercer's eyes widened. He lowered his rifle slightly, glancing at his body camera. "Sheriff, maybe we should..." "Shut your mouth, deputy," Kearns snapped. But a ripple of uncertainty passed through the other officers. Phone cameras appeared in windows along the road. Ruth Ann's live stream counter ticked higher. Elijah held up specific documents. Property taxes paid in full through 2024. No liens, no violations, no legal grounds for seizure. His voice carried across the suddenly quiet field. "And 50 witnesses recording your attempt." For a moment, the morning air crackled with possibility. Several deputies exchanged looks. Body cameras blinked red. The world watched. But Sheriff Kearns's face darkened with rage. "I don't care about your papers. We have credible evidence of narcotics trafficking on this property." He turned to his men. "Execute the search. Secure all buildings." "You have no probable cause," Elijah stated firmly. "Probable cause is whatever I say it is." Kearns nodded to his deputies. "Take him down if he resists." 2 officers grabbed Elijah's arms roughly. He didn't fight as they drove him to his knees in the mud. His careful documentation scattered across the wet ground. "That's right," Kearns taunted. "Face in the dirt where you belong. Should have sold when you had the chance." Ruth Ann's voice rang out. 5,000 watching now, Dalton. They see everything." Deputies moved toward the barns in formation, weapons ready. Elijah remained still in the mud, but his eyes tracked every movement, every position, every weakness. A deputy's boot ground his papers into the muck. Another spat near his head. But Elijah's breathing remained steady, his mind clear and focused. He'd expected this, planned for it, known it would come to this moment. They thought they were watching him break. They were wrong. They thought they had control. They didn't. They thought they knew what they were dealing with, and that would be their ultimate mistake. Mud soaked through Elijah's overalls as he knelt in the red Georgia dirt. His shoulders remained straight, despite the deputy's hand pressing down hard between his shoulder blades. Around him, the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass filled the morning air. "Tear it all apart," Sheriff Kearns commanded, strutting across the farmyard. "Every inch until we find what we're looking for." Deputies swarmed the barn like angry hornets. They ripped doors from hinges, toppled feed barrels, and scattered tools across the concrete floor. Others kicked through Elijah's vegetable garden, boots crushing tender shoots that had just broken through the soil. A sharp bark cut through the chaos. Max, Elijah's old shepherd mix, limped from behind the tractor shed, confused by the invasion. The dog's gray muzzle lifted, scenting the air. "Got a hostile dog here," Deputy Brent Hollis shouted, raising his service weapon. "He's 13 years old," Elijah said evenly. "Half blind and gentle as a lamb." Max wagged his tail uncertainly, taking a tentative step forward. The gunshot cracked across the property. Max yelped once, then crumpled to the ground. "Threat neutralized," Hollis announced with a smirk. He kicked the dog's lifeless body aside. Elijah's hands tightened behind his back, the handcuffs biting into his wrists. His breathing remained measured, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Aw, did we hurt your feelings?" Hollis taunted, squatting down to meet Elijah's eyes. "Maybe if you'd trained that mutt better, he'd still be breathing. But you people never could control your animals, could you?" Ruth Ann's voice carried from her porch. "I got that on video, Brent Hollis. Shot an unarmed animal in cold blood." "Stay out of this, you old bat," Kearns bellowed. He turned to his deputies. "Hollis, take Jackson and search that tractor shed. I bet our probable cause is hiding in there." Elijah watched through lowered eyes as Hollis and another deputy disappeared into the shed. Hidden cameras whirred silently behind loose boards, capturing every movement as Hollis pulled a small bag from his tactical vest. "Well, well," Hollis emerged moments later, holding up the planted evidence. "Look what we found. Someone's been running drugs through this farm operation." "That's impossible," Elijah stated calmly. "You know those aren't mine." "Shut your mouth!" A deputy yanked Elijah to his feet. "Hands where the cameras can see them, drug dealer." They marched him in a circle, making sure Ruth Ann's live stream caught every angle. Comments and viewer counts exploded across social media. Elijah memorized each badge number visible in the morning light, cataloging faces and positions with practiced precision. Inside the barn, a quiet click echoed from behind the false wall. Tactical countermeasures activated on silent command. Radio static burst through deputy communications. Drone feeds pixelated and dropped. Thin trails of smoke began seeping from carefully hidden vents. "What the hell?" A deputy's voice crackled through dead air. "I've lost signal." "Command, do you copy?" Another radio squawked uselessly. White smoke rolled across the farmyard, non-lethal but disorienting. Deputies stumbled in the haze, bumping into each other as their formation dissolved. "Get that smoke under control!" Kearns shouted, but his words were swallowed by the growing chaos. Elijah felt rough hands grab his arms. Through the smoke, he glimpsed Deputy Kyle Mercer's young face, uncertainty written clearly in his features. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Elijah's gaze flicked deliberately toward the tractor shed, then back to Mercer's body camera. Understanding flickered across the deputy's face. He glanced at the shed where Hollis had emerged with the planted drugs. His body camera's red light blinked steadily, recording everything. "Get him in the car," Kearns ordered, coughing in the smoke. "We'll sort this mess out at the station." As they dragged him toward the waiting patrol vehicle, Elijah counted steps and angles, memorizing the tactical layout of his occupied farm. Deputies cursed as their radios crackled with useless static. Drones dropped from the sky, their signals scrambled. The morning sun caught in the smoke, casting everything in an eerie white glow. Ruth Ann's voice cut through it all. 30,000 watching now. The whole world sees what you're doing." Elijah kept his eyes forward, his expression neutral. Let them think the smoke was a malfunction. Let them believe their equipment failures were random. Let them drag him away in handcuffs while their carefully constructed operation crumbled around them. Every moment was recorded. Every action caught on multiple cameras. Every badge number and face logged in his memory with sniper's precision. He'd trained for years to maintain control in chaos. This was just another mission, and these corrupt deputies had no idea they'd stepped into his kill zone. Through the swirling smoke, Elijah caught Mercer's troubled gaze one final time. The young deputy's hand brushed his body camera unconsciously, understanding dawning in his eyes. Evidence was being gathered. Justice would come, but not through violence, through truth, through exposure, through the very system they thought they controlled. The patrol SUV's interior felt like a sauna. Thick Georgia heat trapped behind bulletproof glass. Elijah sat quietly in the back, hands cuffed behind him, watching deputies argue through the metal partition. "Nothing's working!" The deputy in the passenger seat slapped his tablet in frustration. "Can't process the federal verification forms without signal." "Try the satellite backup," another suggested, fiddling with his radio that produced only static. "Already did. Systems completely down." The deputy twisted around to glare at Elijah. "What did you do to our equipment?" Elijah shrugged his broad shoulders. the movement deliberate and slow. Technology can be unreliable out here in the country. Outside, the white smoke that had poured from his barn began to dissipate. Deputies milled around in confusion, their formations scattered. Body cameras blinked silently on their chests, recording everything. "Those cameras still working?" Elijah asked mildly. "Interesting system you've got there. Auto-uploads to secure servers, doesn't it? Lots of departments do that now. Prevents footage from getting lost." The deputies exchanged uneasy glances. Through the windshield, Elijah could see Ruth Ann Carter still on her porch, phone held high as she narrated events for her growing audience. 25,000 viewers now, she called out. 30,000. Keep watching, folks. Show the world what these boys in badges are doing to an innocent man's property. Sheriff Kearns stalked over to the SUV, face flushed red with anger and heat. He yanked open the driver's door. "What's the holdup with processing?" "Systems are down, sir. Can't verify the federal paperwork or run his prints. Nothing's going through." "Then call it in." "Phones are dead, too. Some kind of interference." Kearns slammed his fist against the hood. "Damn it! We need those verifications before we can transport him." He leaned into the car, fixing Elijah with a venomous stare. "This your doing, old man?" "Sheriff," Elijah said calmly, "those body cameras are still recording. Might want to watch your tone." "The footage uploads automatically to secure servers," the deputy added nervously. "Can't access those locally." Kearns straightened up, jaw working as he surveyed the chaos around them. His carefully planned operation was unraveling. Deputies stood around uselessly, equipment dead in their hands. Smoke still wisped from barn vents. Ruth Ann's live stream numbers kept climbing. "Pull back," Kearns finally ordered. "We'll regroup and return with proper documentation." He jabbed a finger at Elijah. "This isn't over." "Course not," Elijah agreed mildly. "But you might want to leave those drugs your deputy planted. Evidence chain of custody and all that." The deputy, who'd been trying to process his paperwork, cursed under his breath. "Sir, without system verification, we can't hold him." "Fine," Kearns spat. "Cut him loose, but leave 2 units on site. Nobody comes in or out without my approval." The handcuffs clicked open. Elijah rubbed his wrists as he climbed out of the SUV, watching deputies scramble back to their vehicles. Only 2 patrol cars remained, blocking his long dirt driveway. "This is just a tactical pause," Kearns growled as he climbed into his command vehicle. "We'll be back with federal backup." Elijah stood in his yard as the convoy pulled out, red dust billowing behind their retreating vehicles. He waited until they were out of sight before heading to his barn. Inside, behind a false wall panel, a hidden door led down to his underground control room. The space was cool and dark, illuminated by the soft glow of monitors. Here, surrounded by surveillance equipment and computer systems, memories of his past life surfaced. 10 years earlier, at a classified training facility. "Your specialty is exceptional," his commanding officer had said during his final briefing. "Counterinsurgency, surveillance, psychological warfare. You've mastered the art of being underestimated." Elijah had stood at attention, still lean and sharp-edged then. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. The best position is the one they don't know you're in. The best weapon is the one they don't see coming." Back in the present, Elijah settled into his command chair. The weight he'd deliberately put on over the years shifted comfortably. His slow-moving farmer's persona had been carefully crafted, a shield of assumptions that made people see what they expected. Just another aging black man trying to hold on to his land. On his main screen, he pulled up footage from the tractor shed cameras. He watched Deputy Hollis plant the drugs again, analyzing the scene frame by frame. The bag had been ready in his vest, the location pre-selected. This wasn't a spontaneous act of racism. It was too organized, too prepared. Computer, cross-reference property records with recent development applications, he commanded. Documents filled the screen. Land surveys, mineral rights assessments, corporate filings buried in shell companies. Elijah leaned forward, eyes narrowing as patterns emerged. The narcotics charge was just a pretext. This was about the land itself, and whatever lay beneath it that made it valuable enough to risk such a brazen seizure attempt. His security system chirped, highlighting movement at his driveway. The 2 patrol cars remained in position, deputies inside watching his house. Waiting. Let them wait, he thought. They had no idea what they'd stepped into. Sunlight filtered through hidden ventilation shafts into Elijah's underground command center. The soft hum of cooling fans kept the electronics at optimal temperature while his fingers moved across the keyboard, diving deep into county records. "Display Magnolia Crest Development Group Holdings," he commanded. The screen filled with a map showing property acquisitions spreading like a cancer across the county. Red markers indicated formerly black-owned farms, now bearing the developer's name. Elijah zoomed in on the properties bordering his land. Johnson's Place to the east, burned down 3 years ago. Official report, faulty wiring. The Williams Farm to the north, destroyed by fire last summer. Cause, supposedly a lightning strike, though there hadn't been a storm for weeks. Cross-reference zoning changes with property sales, he muttered. The computer overlaid dates, revealing a pattern. Each fire was followed by rezoning applications, then quick sales at fraction of market value. Behind every transaction, Magnolia Crest Development Group. His security feeds showed the patrol cars still blocking his driveway. The deputies inside looked bored, scrolling on their phones. They thought they were containing him. In reality, they were giving him uninterrupted time to dig deeper. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. 6 months ago, Commissioner Harold Pike had visited, all smiles and southern courtesy. They'd stood right there in the yard where deputies had shoved him down today. "Mr. Boone," Pike had drawled, "your land would be perfect for our county's economic development initiative. Magnolia Crest is offering generous terms, well above market value." "Not interested in selling," Elijah had replied simply, noting how Pike's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, be reasonable. Progress is coming whether we like it or not. Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen, like with your neighbors." The threat had been clear, but Pike hadn't counted on Elijah's patience or his preparation. His computer chimed with an incoming call from Ruth Ann. He accepted on the secure line. "Elijah, those deputies are still out front, looking mighty comfortable. And you need to see what they're saying about you on the news." He switched one monitor to local coverage. Sheriff Kearns stood at a podium, his expression grave. "This individual has a history of antagonizing law enforcement," Kearns was saying. "We have credible evidence of criminal activity on that property. His aggressive response to legal federal seizure orders only confirms our concerns." The anchor nodded sympathetically. "Sources suggest possible connections to drug trafficking. What can you tell us about that, Sheriff?" "Our investigation is ongoing, but I'll say this. Law-abiding citizens don't deploy military-grade countermeasures against police." Elijah's jaw tightened. The lies were calculated, designed to shape public opinion before the truth could emerge. just like that night with Loretta. The chest pains had started after dinner. He'd called 911 immediately, knowing time was crucial. But the ambulance took 45 minutes to arrive, for a drive that should have taken 15. Road construction delayed us, the EMT had claimed, not meeting his eyes. Later, he'd learned Sheriff Kearns had ordered emergency services to deprioritize calls to his address after Elijah refused to discuss selling his land. Loretta hadn't survived the delay. The memory burned, but Elijah channeled the pain into focus. He pulled up property tax records, finding multiple instances where Kearns had threatened foreclosure over supposedly missed payments. Payments Elijah had documented proof of making. "They're spinning it hard," Ruth Ann's voice brought him back to the present. "Making you sound like some kind of domestic terrorist. But my live stream viewers aren't buying it. They're asking questions about the sheriff's department." "Good," Elijah replied. "Keep that stream running. Document everything." After ending the call, he dove back into research. Something about the development pattern nagged at him. Why these specific properties? Why the urgency? "Display geological surveys for the region," he commanded. Last 10 years. The screen filled with topographical data, soil compositions, mineral content analyses. He almost missed it at first, a subtle variation in core samples. But there it was, rare earth elements, essential for electronics manufacturing, running in concentrated deposits beneath his farm and the surrounding properties. The kind of discovery that could be worth millions to the right buyers. His hands stilled on the keyboard. This was never about drugs or federal seizures or even racial intimidation, though they'd weaponize that eagerly enough. This was about raw greed. The minerals beneath his soil were the real target. The pieces clicked into place. Commissioner Pike's Economic Development Initiative, the suspicious fires, Kearns's escalating pressure tactics. They needed his land to complete their extraction plans, and they'd assumed an aging black farmer would be an easy target. Instead, they'd attacked a man who'd spent years gathering evidence, building secure networks, and preparing for exactly this kind of corruption. Their own greed had made them predictable. Elijah's focus shifted from defense to exposure. He had the data. He had recorded proof. Now he needed to ensure it reached the right people. People who couldn't be bought or threatened into silence. His monitors showed the deputies outside, still watching his house, still believing they had him trapped. They had no idea they were guarding the very man who was about to dismantle their entire corrupt operation. The Georgia afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Sheriff Kearns' deputies repositioned their vehicles. They set up checkpoints at both ends of the dirt road, turning away concerned neighbors and cutting off access to Elijah's farm. The air shimmered with heat rising from hood panels of patrol cars. Inside his command center, Elijah watched his security feeds as a utility truck pulled up. Two workers, escorted by deputies, approached his power meter. Within minutes, the gentle hum of electricity died. His backup generators kicked in seamlessly, their existence hidden beneath the barn's foundation. His phone buzzed with an alert. Account access denied. He checked his banking app to find all his accounts frozen. Not unexpected. They were following their usual playbook: isolation, then escalation. On one monitor, a news broadcast played. Sheriff Kearns stood at a podium, his face tight with manufactured concern. "After further investigation into Mr. Boone's background, we've uncovered disturbing inconsistencies," Kearns announced. Despite his claims of military service, Records indicate he was dishonorably discharged for conduct unbecoming. This man is not the hero he pretends to be. Elijah's jaw clenched. The fabricated documents would be convincing. They had friends in low places at the records office, but he had prepared for this too. He opened his secure email and composed a message to Naomi Price, the retired Atlanta Journal-Constitution investigative journalist known for exposing police corruption. They'd never met, but he'd researched her work thoroughly. The message was brief, containing only an encrypted link and the words, "Truth needs sunlight." The link would give her access to edited footage from his hidden cameras, clear shots of Deputy Hollis planting drugs in the tractor shed, synchronized with body cam footage showing the same deputy discovering the evidence minutes later. His phone vibrated again. An unknown number. "This is Kyle Mercer. What I saw today wasn't right, but I don't know what to do." Elijah studied the message. Deputy Mercer's hesitation during the morning raid had been genuine. Young, not yet hardened by the department's culture, still capable of doubt. He replied carefully, "Sometimes doing right means standing alone. Document everything." A notification popped up on his weather station, temperature dropping as sunset approached. Through his cameras, he watched deputies gathering in small groups beyond his fence line, checking weapons, speaking in low voices. Their body language had changed, more aggressive, less official. Sheriff Kearns's voice crackled over their radios. "Maintain positions. If he approaches the fence after dark, consider it a threat. Use appropriate force." Translation: provoke a confrontation that could be justified as self-defense. On another screen, local social media lit up with manufactured outrage. Carefully worded posts questioned his military service, suggested drug connections, hinted at violence in his past. The Sheriff's Department's social media team was earning their overtime pay. Ruth Ann Carter's live stream comments told a different story. Viewers were asking pointed questions about property records, development plans, and the sheriff's connection to Magnolia Crest. The truth was fighting back, but slowly. His satellite internet connection, independent from local providers, showed an incoming email. Naomi Price had responded already. "Footage received. Running verification. Need more background. Can you talk?" He typed back, "Not secure. Check property records for Magnolia Crest Development Group. Follow the money." Through his perimeter sensors, he detected movement in the tree line beyond his north fence. Deputies taking positions, using gathering darkness for cover. Their radio traffic was quiet now. They'd switched to private channels for whatever came next. His thermal cameras painted their heat signatures in stark relief against cooling foliage. 12 men, spread out, carrying long guns. No body cameras visible. This would be off the books. A text from Ruth Ann. Sheriff's Department announced road closure for night training exercise. They're clearing civilians from the area. Elijah checked his defensive systems. Motion sensors active. Non-lethal countermeasures ready. All cameras recording with backup power and redundant storage. He'd anticipated night operations. It's when bullies felt boldest. The last rays of sun painted his fields in blood-red light. More deputies arrived, gathering in the shadows beyond his fence. Their headlights stayed dark. Their badges didn't reflect light, covered or removed. Everything about their body language screamed unofficial action. Through his zoom lens, he saw Sheriff Kearns park behind the line of patrol cars, staying safely back while sending his men forward. A coward's command position. His screens showed local temperatures dropping into early evening cool, but humidity remained high. Ground fog would form soon in the low spots, adding another layer of concealment for whatever they planned. Deputy Mercer's patrol car was notably absent. Perhaps one conscience had found its limit. The sunset painted everything in deep orange and purple shadows as Elijah watched the deputies make final preparations. They thought darkness would give them advantage. Not knowing his cameras could pierce any shadow, his sensors could map every movement. They thought they were the hunters. Local news vans, parked well back from the scene, kept at distance by patrol cars, but cameras ready. Whatever happened tonight, the sheriff wanted media nearby to spin it his way. The final direct sunlight faded from his fields. In the growing darkness, deputies moved with increasing confidence toward his fences. Night vision gear came out of cases. Radio silence became complete. Night settled over Elijah's farm like a heavy blanket. The last purple streaks of sunset faded to black as deputies moved through adjacent properties without their patrol vehicles' telltale lights. Their heat signatures bloomed bright on Elijah's thermal imaging screens, 12 men spreading out along his southern field. The first orange glow started small. A match struck against the windbreak. Then another, and another. Flames licked up the dry corn stalks, spreading with frightening speed through his crops. The fire formed an advancing line, driven by the evening breeze toward his barn. Through his cameras, Elijah watched deputies cut the metal fencing that contained his cattle. The wire snapped with harsh pings. His livestock, confused by the approaching fire and smoke, began pushing through the gaps. Panicked moos carried through the night air as his herd scattered. "Those bastards are burning his fields!" Ruth Ann Carter's voice crackled through her live stream. "They're destroying everything!" Her phone light bobbed as she hurried down her driveway, broadcasting everything. Hundreds of viewers watched in real time as she documented the flames. 2 patrol cars roared up her driveway, lights flashing. Deputies jumped out with hands on their weapons. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to go back inside now." The deputy's voice was hard. Ruth Ann stood her ground, phone steady. "This is my property. I'm documenting criminal activity from my own land. Final warning. Stop recording and go inside." "No, sir. I will not. The whole world needs to see what you're doing to that man's farm." The deputies grabbed her arms, knocking the phone from her grip. It clattered to the ground, still transmitting as they twisted her wrists into cuffs. "Ruth Ann Carter, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and interfering with a police operation. The only obstruction here is to the truth," she shouted, as they pushed her into the back of a patrol car. Her phone continued streaming from the gravel, showing deputies' boots and the growing fire beyond. Inside his command center, Elijah's fingers flew across his keyboard. He compiled footage from multiple angles, thermal imaging showing deputies starting the fires, high-resolution video of them cutting fences, Ruth Ann's arrest, all synced with GPS timestamps and location data. He encrypted the files and transmitted everything to Naomi Price's secure server. His phone buzzed with her response, getting calls from network news, sheriff's story falling apart. "Keep sending." The fire spread in a cruel arc, consuming months of work. The corn he'd planted, tended, and watched grow was vanishing in waves of orange flame. Smoke rolled thick and black against the night sky. His irrigation system activated automatically, but it couldn't match the fire's appetite. Local news helicopters appeared overhead, their cameras capturing the inferno. Sheriff Kearns was already spinning his narrative, claiming Elijah had set the fires himself to destroy evidence. But national media outlets were picking up inconsistencies. Headlines appeared on Elijah's news feeds. Questions arise in Georgia farm siege. Viral videos show contradictions in sheriff's story. Civil rights groups demand federal investigation. Through his thermal cameras, Elijah tracked deputies moving through the smoke. They were getting bolder, coming closer to his buildings now. Their body language showed confidence that fire would flush him out. They didn't understand that his Barnes Metal construction and underground command center were designed to withstand far worse. Ruth Ann's live stream had caught everything. Even after her arrest, viewers were downloading and sharing the footage faster than it could be taken down. Her phone, still transmitting from her driveway, captured deputies laughing as flames consumed Elijah's fields. A message notification popped up from Deputy Kyle Mercer. "They arrested Ms. Carter. Sheriff says she assaulted officers. It's a lie. I can't be part of this anymore." Elijah replied, "Document everything. Save every text. Record every conversation." The fire reached his irrigation ditches and slowed, unable to jump the water-filled channels. But the damage was done. Acres of crops destroyed. Livestock scattered across 3 counties. Ruth Ann in jail for telling the truth. The deputies' actions had crossed a critical line. By destroying crops under federal subsidy protection and tampering with USDA-monitored livestock operations, they'd elevated this beyond local jurisdiction. Every burned stalk of corn, every cut fence, every second of Ruth Ann's arrest was now evidence of federal crimes. Naomi Price's latest message confirmed it. FBI Civil Rights Division requesting files. DOJ watching closely. Keep recording. On his main screen, Elijah pulled up thermal imagery of Sheriff Kearns watching from his command vehicle, safely distant from the fires his men had set. The flames reflected in Elijah's eyes as understanding hardened into certainty. He'd expected corruption, planned for intimidation. But this level of destruction revealed their desperation. His voice was barely a whisper in the underground room. "You just made this federal." Dawn crept over the scorched fields, revealing the full extent of last night's destruction. Smoke still curled from charred corn stalks, and broken fence posts jutted like broken teeth across Elijah's land. But something else was spreading faster than the flames had. Truth. CNN's morning broadcast played the damning footage on repeat. Deputy Brent Hollis, clearly visible in high-definition video, planting evidence in Elijah's tractor shed. The deputy's movements were methodical, practiced, as he tucked bags of narcotics behind equipment panels. His voice, caught perfectly on audio, made their intentions clear. "Plant it deep," Hollis had said to his partner. "Make sure it looks like he's been hiding it for months. Sheriff wants this to stick." The footage played across every major network. Local Atlanta stations ran it hourly. Social media exploded with screenshots, analyzing every frame. Police accountability groups dissected the video, highlighting Hollis's badge number and face. By 9 a.m., the Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced an internal affairs investigation into the entire department. Their statement was uncharacteristically direct. Allegations of evidence tampering and civil rights violations will be thoroughly investigated. All officers involved are subject to review. The governor's office released their statement an hour later. The disturbing footage from yesterday's events demands immediate transparency. We cannot allow abuse of power to tarnish Georgia law enforcement's reputation. I have directed the Attorney General to oversee this investigation personally. Outside the farm's perimeter, The remaining deputies looked distinctly uncomfortable. Their aggressive posturing from yesterday had evaporated. Several checked their phones constantly, watching their department's reputation crumble in real time. A few removed their name tags. Deputy Kyle Mercer sat in his patrol car, hands shaking as he typed an encrypted message to Naomi Price. His conscience had finally won out over his fear. Sheriff Kearns has been coordinating with Magnolia Crest Development for months. They want the mineral rights. There's a paper trail of kickbacks. Check Commissioner Pike's offshore accounts. I have dates and amounts. Inside her Atlanta office, Naomi's decades of investigative instincts fired up. She cross-referenced Kyle's information against property records and bank statements leaked by other department sources. The pattern was undeniable. She began drafting her exposé. Public sentiment shifted dramatically. Social media filled with support for Elijah. Civil rights organizations announced legal support. Local churches organized prayer vigils. Even conservative law enforcement groups distanced themselves from Kearns's actions. Around noon, Ruth Ann Carter walked free. The district attorney personally apologized, dropping all charges. News cameras caught her emerging from jail, straight-backed and defiant. They thought they could silence the truth, she told reporters, but cameras don't lie. What they did to Elijah's farm, what they tried to do to me, it's all coming out now. Her live stream footage had been viewed millions of times. Each share, each repost, drove another nail into the department's credibility. The sight of deputies dragging an elderly woman away for filming from her own property had sparked national outrage. Elijah watched it all unfold from his command center. Decades of tactical training had taught him to recognize winning momentum. The corrupt system was buckling under its own exposure. Even Sheriff Kearns had gone silent, his usual media bravado notably absent. Through his perimeter cameras, Elijah observed deputies packing up equipment, removing the blockade. Their body language screamed defeat. Some avoided looking at the cameras entirely, knowing their faces might already be trending online. Naomi's latest message confirmed his assessment. Sheriff's support crumbling. County commissioners distancing themselves. 3 deputies already resigned. Keep watching. Kearns will be done by sunset. For the first time since the siege began, Elijah allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Not victory. He'd seen too much combat to celebrate prematurely. But satisfaction in watching justice gain traction. His wife Loretta would have appreciated the poetry. Truth as the ultimate weapon. Deputy Kyle Mercer's unmarked car pulled up to his mailbox. The young officer left a thick envelope of internal documents before quickly driving away. More evidence. More ammunition for the truth. Just as Elijah reached for his tablet to check the latest news updates, a new email notification appeared. The sender, Department of Defense, Personnel Records Division. Subject line, Urgent Investigation Notice. His hands, steady through firefights and sieges, tensed as he opened the message. The text was brief, but devastating. This office has received credible evidence questioning the authenticity of your military service records. Allegations include falsification of discharge status and unauthorized claims of special operations service. A formal investigation has been initiated. Your presence is required. Elijah's jaw clenched. After decades of classified missions, his service record was supposedly untouchable. Someone had found a way to attack it anyway, to make his truth look like lies. The timestamp on the email matched a call from Sheriff Kearns to a number in Washington, D.C. They couldn't beat him with force, so they were trying to destroy his credibility. If they could make people doubt his military service, they could make them doubt everything else. Through his window, he could see news vans already turning around, probably heading back to their stations with this breaking development. The story would shift again. Heroes could become villains in the time it took to read a headline. Sheriff Dalton Kearns stood at the courthouse steps, his uniform pressed and medals gleaming in the afternoon sun. News cameras crowded close as he held up a thick folder of documents, his face grave with manufactured concern. "It pains me deeply to share this information," Kearns announced, his voice carrying across the packed square. "But the public deserves the truth about who Elijah Boone really is." He pulled out papers bearing official-looking Department of Defense letterheads. These records show Mr. Boone was dishonorably discharged in 1992 for conduct unbecoming. He never served in any special operations unit. His claims of being a Navy SEAL are stolen valor of the worst kind. The crowd murmured. Reporters' hands shot up, but Kearns plowed forward, his rehearsed speech designed for maximum damage. "The man currently occupying that farm is a fraud. He's used false military credentials to gain sympathy while engaging in criminal activities. We have evidence suggesting involvement in drug trafficking, weapons stockpiling, and domestic terrorism." In her Atlanta office, Naomi Price watched the live stream with growing anger. Her computer screen showed multiple chat windows with military contacts, all hitting dead ends when trying to verify Elijah's service record. "Nothing in the public database," one Pentagon source wrote, "but that's not unusual for spec ops. Need higher clearance to access sealed files." Another message popped up. DoD records showing dishonorable discharge look legitimate on surface. Something's wrong, though. Dates don't align with known SEAL team deployments. Naomi's hands flew across her keyboard, cross-referencing dates and locations. But Elijah's deepest cover missions had been deliberately obscured. No paper trail meant deniability for the government, and now vulnerability for him. Social media erupted with fresh outrage. The same accounts that had supported Elijah hours ago now branded him a traitor. Local Facebook groups filled with angry posts about stolen valor. Twitter threads dissected his lies with brutal efficiency. Inside his command center, Elijah watched his reputation crumble in real time. The memory surfaced unwanted. A classified briefing room, 1994. "Your record will show standard service only," the CIA handler had explained. "No trace of special operations or covert missions. That's your protection, and ours. If anything goes wrong, we never knew you." He'd accepted it then. Black Ops required black holes in the paperwork. But now, those holes were being filled with poison. His phone buzzed. The local credit union had frozen his accounts pending federal investigation. The grocery store texted to cancel his regular supply delivery. The farm equipment repair shop requested immediate return of borrowed tools. The community was turning, quick as a summer storm. Deputy Kyle Mercer's encrypted message carried more bad news. "They're manipulating classified gaps in your file, inserting false disciplinary reports where records are sealed. Can't prove they're fake without exposing real missions," Naomi called, her voice tight with frustration. "I've got sources in 3 branches of service. They all hit classification walls. Without official confirmation of your actual missions, we can't disprove these forgeries." "The missions are still classified," Elijah said quietly. "They'll stay that way for another decade at least." "Damn it, Elijah! There must be someone who can verify." "My team is scattered. Half are still active duty. The others? He paused, remembering faces lost to time and combat. They can't help without exposing ongoing operations. Through his security feeds, Elijah watched Sheriff Kearns working the crowd, playing the role of disappointed patriot. The performance was masterful, righteous anger mixed with sad head-shaking. He'd planned this ambush perfectly. News helicopters circled overhead, filming the farm from every angle. Their cameras caught glimpses of security measures that now seemed sinister rather than defensive. Local coverage painted each detail in the worst possible light. Military-grade surveillance equipment discovered on civilian property. Underground facilities raise questions about illegal activities. Sources suggest connections to domestic extremist groups. Ruth Ann Carter called, her voice shaking. "They're saying awful things about you in town, Elijah. People are scared. Minister Williams asked me if you ever threatened anyone with military training." Elijah's tablet chimed with another alert. Federal Express had canceled service to his address, citing security concerns. The feed store revoked his bulk purchase account. One by one, the threads of normal life unraveled. A drone buzzed close to his window. Not law enforcement, but media, looking for any image that could feed the growing narrative of danger. The same technology he'd once used for reconnaissance was now exposing him. His secure phone lit up with a message from a Department of Justice server. The text was brief, but devastating. Notice of impending federal warrant. Based on evidence of fraudulent military service claims, unauthorized possession of classified materials, and suspicion of domestic terrorism activities, an arrest warrant is being prepared. Surrender of the subject property is required within 24 hours. Thunder rolled across darkening Georgia skies as patrol cars crawled up Elijah's dirt driveway. Their headlights cut through the gathering gloom, blue lights silent but spinning. Sheriff Kearns led the procession in his personal SUV, followed by 3 marked units and a prisoner transport van. Deputy Kyle Mercer gripped his steering wheel tight, watching raindrops start to fall. The warrant folder on his passenger seat felt heavy with injustice. He'd seen the documents, rushed through processing, signatures still wet on the pages. Elijah stood on his porch, hands visible, face calm. The rain began falling harder, drumming on the tin roof above him. His oversized overalls and worn work boots made him look exactly like what they'd wanted everyone to believe. Just a simple farmer who'd reached too far. "Elijah Boone!" Kearns's voice boomed through his vehicle's speaker. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest. Step down slowly with your hands where we can see them." News vans pulled up at the edge of the property. Camera crews rushed to set up under umbrellas, fighting the wind for stable shots. Kearns had timed it perfectly. Prime-time evening news would catch every moment. Lightning flashed as Elijah descended his porch steps. Rain plastered his gray-streaked hair to his forehead. Each deliberate movement projected peaceful compliance. No resistance, no drama. Just an old man walking steadily toward the waiting deputies. "On your knees!" Kearns ordered, though Elijah was already kneeling in the mud. The sheriff approached with exaggerated caution, playing to the cameras. "Hands behind your back!" The handcuffs clicked shut. Kearns made sure they were extra tight, drawing a slight wince that only Deputy Mercer seemed to notice. The sheriff's face gleamed with triumph as he recited the charges. Fraudulent representation of military service, possession of classified materials, suspected domestic terrorism activities. Each accusation carried clearly to the waiting microphones. Through it all, Elijah remained silent, His eyes tracked the positions of each deputy, each camera, each vehicle, not with fear or anger, but with the careful observation of a man counting pieces on a chessboard. They walked him past the news crews, Kearns gripping his arm hard enough to bruise. Reporters shouted questions. "Did you fake your military record? Are you running a terrorist cell? What's really in those underground rooms?" Lightning crackled overhead as they reached the transport van. Elijah turned slightly, making eye contact with Deputy Mercer. A slight nod passed between them, so subtle the cameras missed it completely. At the county jail, they processed him methodically. Fingerprints, mugshot, orange jumpsuit, each step documented for maximum humiliation. Kearns supervised personally, savoring every moment. "Smile for the camera, boy," the sheriff taunted as flashbulbs popped. "Whole world's gonna see what a fraud you really are." In the booking area, Elijah's personal items were catalogued. Watch, wallet, keys, cell phone. The booking officer held up a simple silver chain with a small USB drive attached. "Medical alert information," Elijah said quietly. "Got a heart condition." Kearns snorted. "Yeah, I bet you do. Tag it and bag it with the rest." What none of them realized was that removing the drive from Elijah's possession had triggered its fail-safe protocol. Encrypted data packets were already flowing through secure channels to very specific federal servers. They led him to a holding cell and left him alone. Through the small window, he could see Kearns giving another press conference in the jail lobby. The sheriff was in his element, playing the role of righteous lawman bringing down a dangerous fraud. "This arrest sends a clear message," Kearns proclaimed. "Nobody is above the law, not even those who hide behind false military honors." In her Atlanta office, Naomi Price's secure phone lit up with an incoming message. The sender ID made her sit up straight. "Department of Defense, Office of Special Investigations. Ms. Price, we understand you have been gathering information regarding Elijah Boone. Please prepare all documentation for immediate review. A team will contact you within the hour. This matter now falls under federal jurisdiction. Maintain absolute discretion." She glanced at her main screen, where Sheriff Kearns was still grandstanding for the local news. His words carried the absolute certainty of a man who believed he'd won completely. In his cell, Elijah sat perfectly still on the thin mattress. His breathing was slow and measured. To the guards watching through the security camera, he appeared resigned. Just another broken man facing hard consequences. But beneath that carefully crafted exterior, decades of tactical training hummed like a silent engine. Each minute that passed brought encrypted files closer to the right eyes. Each moment of Kearns's gloating victory speech dug the sheriff's hole deeper. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the high cell window. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating Elijah's face. In that split second, the mask of defeat slipped just slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Through the cell block's thin walls, he could hear Kearns's voice still holding court in the lobby, drunk on apparent triumph. The sheriff had no idea that with every self-congratulatory word, he was digging his own grave deeper. The old saying echoed in Elijah's mind. The enemy is most vulnerable at the moment of victory. He'd learned that lesson well in places that would never appear in any official record. Now all he had to do was wait. Morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse's high windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden benches. Elijah sat in the front row of the arraignment courtroom. orange jumpsuit stark against the dark wood paneling. His wrists and ankles were shackled. Kearns's special instruction to the transport team. The gallery behind him filled quickly. News crews jostled for position, their cameras trained on his back. Ruth Ann Carter slipped into a seat near the middle, her face tight with worry. Deputy Kyle Mercer stood guard by the door, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Sheriff Kearns strutted in through the side entrance, chest puffed out beneath his polished badge. He dressed in full ceremonial uniform for the occasion, brass gleaming, boots mirror-shined. Commissioner Harold Pike followed close behind, his expensive suit marking him as different from the working-class spectators. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice cracked through the murmuring crowd. Judge Malcolm Whitaker emerged from his chambers, his black robe billowing as he ascended to the bench. "Be seated," Whitaker commanded, adjusting his reading glasses. "We're here for the arraignment of Elijah Boone on multiple federal charges." The main courtroom doors burst open. 3 men in dark suits strode in, flanked by uniformed federal marshals. The lead agent held up his credentials. Special Agent Marcus Torres, FBI Public Corruption Unit. These proceedings are temporarily suspended pending federal investigation. Judge Whitaker's face flushed red. "Now see here." "Your Honor," Torres cut in smoothly, "I have a federal order superseding local jurisdiction." He approached the bench, presenting a thick envelope of documents. Kearns stepped forward, his ceremony disrupted. "This is outrageous. We have valid charges." "Sheriff Dalton Kearns," another agent approached him. "We'll need you to step aside. We have some questions about certain financial transactions between your department and Magnolia Crest Development Group." The color drained from Commissioner Pike's face. He began edging toward the side door, but a marshal moved to block his path. "Commissioner Harold Pike," Torres called out, "please remain where you are. We have particular interest in recent zoning changes approved under unusual circumstances." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Cameras swiveled from Elijah to capture Kearns' increasingly panicked expression. Ruth Ann Carter pulled out her phone, live streaming once again. "I have copies here," Torres continued, his voice carrying clearly, "of mineral survey reports conducted secretly on multiple properties. Properties that subsequently experienced suspicious fires, followed by forced sales to Magnolia Crest at severely reduced prices. More federal agents entered, wheeling in hand trucks loaded with empty document boxes. They headed straight for the clerk's office. "This is a fishing expedition," Kearns protested. "You can't just—" "We can, and we are," Torres replied calmly. "We have probable cause linking your department to multiple civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit land fraud. The mineral rights alone—" "I want my lawyer," Pike suddenly shouted. "That would be wise," Torres agreed. "You'll both need good attorneys. We've uncovered quite an extensive paper trail of kickbacks, Mr. Commissioner. The governor's office is particularly interested in those offshore accounts." The marshals began methodically removing Elijah's restraints. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. Through it all, his expression remained neutral, but his eyes never left Kearns's face. Deputy Mercer stepped forward. "Sir, I have documentation you might want to see. Records of patrol assignments to properties that later burned." Kearns whirled on him. "You little traitor!" "Thank you, Deputy," Torres interrupted. "We'll need to speak with you formally. Your cooperation will be noted." More agents streamed in from the clerk's office, their boxes now filled with files and hard drives. One carried a laptop clearly marked as belonging to Commissioner Pike. "This is all a mistake," Pike stammered. "Those zoning changes were completely legitimate. The mineral rights surveys were conducted months before the fires began," Torres stated. "Interesting timing. Even more interesting that your signature appears on both the surveys and the subsequent property transfers to Magnolia Crest." Ruth Ann's live stream counter ticked past 10,000 viewers. The local news crews pushed closer, capturing every moment of Kearns's visible unraveling. "Mr. Boone," Torres turned to Elijah, "you're free to go. We'll need to speak with you later about the surveillance data you provided, but for now, you can return home." Elijah nodded once, his movements still measured and calm. He turned toward the exit, pausing briefly beside Kearns. The sheriff's face twisted. "You think you've won? This ain't over." "Sheriff Kearns," Torres cut in sharply, "I strongly suggest you exercise your right to remain silent. You'll have plenty to explain as it is." Federal agents continued their systematic sweep of the courthouse offices. Every file cabinet, every computer, every archived record was being boxed and logged. Through the windows, more federal vehicles could be seen arriving in the parking lot. The morning sun had climbed higher now, harsh light flooding the courtroom. It caught the drops of sweat beading on Commissioner Pike's forehead, the tremor in Kearns's hands as he pulled out his phone to call his lawyer. Cartons of seized records formed a growing wall near the courtroom doors. Each box was carefully labeled and sealed with evidence tape, holding years of hidden corruption within their cardboard confines. The gleaming glass facade of Magnolia Crest Development Group's headquarters reflected the midday sun like a mirror. Inside the top-floor executive suite, paper shredders whined at full capacity as accountants rushed to destroy evidence. Special Agent Dana Ruiz adjusted her tactical vest, signaling her team. "FBI! Federal agents!" The reinforced glass doors exploded inward under the battering ram's impact. Agents poured through, weapons raised. "Everyone freeze! Hands where we can see them!" Ruiz's voice cut through the panic. "Step away from the shredders! Move!" Accountants stumbled back from their desks, hands raised. Loose papers fluttered to the marble floor like leaves in autumn. The CEO's secretary lunged for her computer's power button, but an agent grabbed her wrist. "Cyber team, secure those terminals," Ruiz commanded. Tech specialists rushed to workstations, plugging in devices to prevent remote wiping. "Nobody touches anything!" In the corner office, they found CEO Richard Maxwell frantically typing commands, trying to trigger an emergency server purge. A cyber agent shouldered him aside, fingers flying across the keyboard to interrupt the deletion sequence. "Got it!" the agent called out. "Offshore transfer records preserved." Multiple accounts linked to Sheriff Kearns and Commissioner Pike. Ruiz picked up a leather-bound ledger from Maxwell's desk, flipping through pages of handwritten notes. "Well, well, looks like someone kept a personal record of every kickback." She held up the book. "Log it as evidence." Down the hall, file cabinets yielded more secrets. An agent waved a stack of papers. "Ma'am, GPS tracking data from county patrol vehicles. Deputy Hollis's car was present at 3 different farm fires before they started." A commotion erupted near the emergency stairs. Deputy Brent Hollis, who'd been meeting with Magnolia Crest executives, tried slipping away during the chaos. An agent moved to block his path. "Out of my way!" Hollis shoved the agent hard, following up with a wild punch that caught the agent's shoulder. The hallway erupted in violence. Hollis's police training made him dangerous, but he was outnumbered. He slammed one agent into a wall, but 2 more tackled him from behind. They crashed into a reception desk, sending phones and monitors crashing. "Stop resisting!" An agent drove his knee into Hollis's back, while another grabbed his flailing arms. Hollis's face met marble flooring with a dull thud. The fight drained out of him as handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "Brent Hollis," Ruiz read from her warrant as agents hauled him up. "You're under arrest for evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to commit arson." In a conference room converted to a temporary interview space, Deputy Kyle Mercer sat with federal investigators. His voice shook slightly as he detailed years of corruption. "Sheriff Kearns ordered us to target specific properties," Mercer testified. "Always black-owned farms. We'd plant drugs during routine stops, file false reports. Hollis handled the more violent stuff: vandalism, threats, the fires." An agent pushed a photo across the table. "This barn fire from last March. You were on duty that night?" "Yeah." Mercer's face tightened. "Hollis said he needed backup for surveillance. When I got there, the barn was already burning. He laughed about it, said the owner would have to sell now." Back in the executive suite, cyber teams worked to reconstruct deleted files. Screens filled with spreadsheets tracking payments to county officials. Each condemned property shows a corresponding wire transfer, a tech reported. Kearns and Pike got percentage cuts based on property value and mineral surveys. Maxwell sat slumped in a chair, watching as agents boxed up decades of corrupt dealings. His empire of stolen land and buried minerals crumbled with each sealed evidence container. "Sir," an agent burst in, "we found their geological survey maps. Every targeted farm sits on rare earth mineral deposits. They were using the sheriff's department to force sales at fraction of true value." Ruiz nodded grimly. "Document everything. I want a complete paper trail for the prosecutors." News vans gathered outside the building as word spread. Reporters filmed federal agents carrying out box after box of evidence. Local stations interrupted regular programming for breaking updates. In the federal courthouse across town, judges reviewed the mounting evidence. One by one, they signed arrest warrants for Brent Hollis and Harold Pike. The charges filled multiple pages: conspiracy, fraud, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice. Alerts lit up phones across the state. Headlines screamed about corruption exposed and justice in motion. Social media exploded with clips of Hollis being led out in cuffs, his face bruised from the fight. By afternoon, the Magnolia Crest offices stood empty except for federal evidence teams. They worked methodically, documenting every file, every computer, every scrap of paper that might reveal more threads in the web of corruption. Their investigation was far from over, but the first dominoes had finally fallen. Red and blue lights painted the perfectly trimmed hedges of Sheriff Dalton Kearns's three-story mansion. Federal vehicles lined the curved driveway, their armor gleaming in the first rays of dawn. Special Agent Dana Ruiz stood at the front of the formation, her dark suit a stark contrast against the white marble steps. "Sheriff Dalton Kearns," her voice carried through the bullhorn. "This is the FBI. We have federal warrants for your arrest. Exit the premises immediately." The mansion's heavy oak door flew open. Kearns stormed out in his bathrobe and slippers, face twisted in rage. "What the hell is this? You have no authority here. This is my jurisdiction." "Not anymore." Ruiz lowered the bullhorn and held up a thick stack of documents. Multiple sealed federal indictments for civil rights violations, conspiracy to commit fraud, and covering up arsons targeting minority-owned properties. "This is ridiculous." Kearns's face reddened as he backed toward his door. "I'm the law in this county. You can't." "Deputy Schmidt!" he barked at the young officer guarding his gate. "Don't let them through. That's an order." Schmidt hesitated, hand hovering near his weapon. Federal agents tensed, weapons ready but not raised. The morning air crackled with tension. "Last chance, Sheriff," Ruiz called out. "Come peacefully, or we add resisting arrest." Instead of complying, Kearns spun and bolted for his door. Schmidt made his choice, rushing to block the gate with his patrol car. It was the wrong move. 2 agents tackled Schmidt before he could draw his weapon. They slammed him against his cruiser's hood, cuffs clicking shut as he struggled. "You're interfering with a federal arrest," one agent growled. "Bad career move, son." More agents poured through the now open gate. Kearns barely made it 3 steps inside his house before they caught him. He thrashed and cursed as they dragged him back onto his pristine front lawn. "This is persecution," he shouted, as agents forced him to his knees. "This is all because of that troublemaker Boone. He's the real criminal." News vans screeched to a halt outside the gate. Cameras rolled as Kearns fought against the handcuffs, his bathrobe tangled around his legs. His perfectly coiffed hair fell in disarray across his sweating face. "You're making a huge mistake." Spittle flew from his mouth. "I have friends in Washington. I'll have all your badges." Ruiz knelt beside him, tightening the cuffs another notch. "Your friends are being arrested too, Sheriff. The game's over." A crowd gathered beyond the gate. Some of Kearns's supporters shouted angry protests, but they were drowned out by cheers and calls for justice. Signs appeared. "Black Farmers Matter" and "End Corrupt Policing." Mrs. Kearns appeared in the doorway, wrapped in an expensive silk robe. Her face remained expressionless as agents led her husband down the winding driveway. She didn't move to help or comfort him, just watched with cold eyes as his empire crumbled. The morning sun climbed higher as news helicopters circled overhead. Their cameras captured every stumbling step of Kearns's walk of shame, the same path he'd forced countless others to walk over his years of corruption. "You can't do this to me," Kearns kept shouting as agents guided him toward an armored transport. "I'm the sheriff." "Not anymore," Ruiz corrected him, reading his rights over his continued protests. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Neighbors emerged from nearby mansions to watch the spectacle. Some filmed with phones. Others quickly retreated inside, perhaps wondering if they'd be next. The investigations were far from over. Deputy Schmidt was loaded into a separate vehicle, his young face shocked as reality set in. His blind loyalty to Kearns had just destroyed his career. Other deputies who arrived to support their sheriff quickly backed away, not wanting to share his fate. Mrs. Kearns finally moved, but only to close the heavy door with a decisive click. Through the windows, agents could be seen beginning their search, carrying out boxes and computers. The mansion's security cameras recorded it all, just as Elijah's had recorded the raid on his farm. Miles away, on his weathered farmhouse porch, Elijah Boone sat in his rocking chair, watching the arrest unfold on a small television. His face remained carefully neutral, betraying no emotion as justice finally arrived at Kearns's doorstep. The morning sun warmed his shoulders, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed, greeting the new day. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as Elijah Boone approached the witness stand. His measured steps betrayed none of the anxiety that would grip most men facing their persecutors. He settled into the hard wooden chair, adjusting his crisp navy suit, a stark contrast to the overalls his opponents had once mocked. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor requested. "Elijah Marcus Boone." His voice carried clearly through the packed gallery. "Mr. Boone, can you identify the man who entered your property on April 15th? The prosecutor gestured toward Brent Hollis, who sat scowling at the defense table. "Deputy Brent Hollis," Elijah answered, pointing without hesitation. "He's wearing a gray suit today, but I remember him better in his tactical gear when he planted drugs in my tractor shed." The courtroom's giant screens flickered to life, showing crystal-clear footage from Elijah's hidden cameras. Hollis's face drained of color as he watched himself stuffing plastic bags into farm equipment. The audio picked up his casual racism with perfect clarity. "This'll teach that fat boy to know his place." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Several jurors visibly recoiled. "And this GPS data?" The prosecutor indicated a new display showing patrol car movements. "Those are official vehicle locations overlaid with reported barn fires." Elijah leaned forward. "Notice how Unit 47, Deputy Hollis's car, appears at each location exactly 30 minutes before the fires were called in." Defense attorneys shuffled papers nervously. Their strategy of painting Elijah as an unstable threat had crumbled against his composed testimony. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter into evidence the complete investigative findings of journalist Naomi Price." The prosecutor lifted a thick binder. "Including mineral surveys commissioned by Magnolia Crest Development, proving their knowledge of valuable deposits beneath targeted properties." Naomi Price sat in the front row, her silver hair gleaming under courthouse lights. She'd spent months connecting documents to offshore accounts, tracing millions in kickbacks to Sheriff Kearns and his conspirators. During cross-examination, the defense attorney attempted to rattle Elijah. "Isn't it true you deliberately concealed your military background to deceive local law enforcement?" "No, sir." Elijah's voice remained steady. "My service record was always available through proper channels. The sheriff chose to fabricate a false one instead." "But you intentionally appeared non-threatening, gained weight, played slow and simple." The attorney pressed, desperate for any opening. "I lived quietly and minded my business," Elijah corrected. "The fact that you assumed an overweight black farmer couldn't be intelligent or capable, that's your prejudice, not my deception." Several jurors nodded. The defense attorney retreated. Kyle Mercer's testimony proved equally damaging. Though his voice trembled, his words rang with conviction as he detailed years of systematic harassment targeting minority landowners. "We were ordered to find reasons for searches," Kyle explained. "If we couldn't find anything, we were told to create violations. Those who refused faced retaliation." During the afternoon recess, tensions boiled over. As Elijah walked the courthouse hallway, a red-faced man, Hollis's brother-in-law, according to witnesses, burst from a side door. "You ruined his life!" the man screamed, charging forward with raised fists. "U.S." Marshals reacted instantly. They tackled the attacker with practiced efficiency, driving him to the marble floor before he could reach Elijah. The commotion drew gasps and shouts from bystanders. Elijah hadn't flinched. He stood watching calmly as marshals hauled the struggling man away, his training evident in his controlled response to the threat. When the jury returned after deliberations, the courtroom fell silent. The forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. "On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights, we find the defendants guilty." Relief swept through the gallery with each subsequent conviction. Conspiracy, fraud, evidence tampering. The list continued. Hollis slumped in his chair. His attorney patted his shoulder awkwardly. The judge adjusted her glasses, reviewing the verdicts before addressing the court. Given the egregious nature of these crimes and the overwhelming evidence presented, I am issuing an immediate permanent injunction. She fixed Elijah with a direct look. Mr. Boone's property is hereby protected from any future seizure attempts. Additionally, I'm ordering federal oversight of all county law enforcement activities for the next 5 years. Her gavel crack echoed with finality. U.S. Marshals moved to take Hollis into custody, while prosecutors conferred about upcoming trials for the remaining conspirators. The system that had nearly crushed Elijah Boone lay exposed and broken before him, dismantled by patience, preparation, and unwavering dignity in the face of injustice. The federal courthouse hummed with anticipation as victims of past land seizures filled the wooden benches. Many wore their Sunday best, though some deliberately chose work clothes, a silent reminder of the farms they'd lost. Armed marshals lined the walls, their watchful eyes scanning for trouble. Elijah sat in the front row beside Ruth Ann Carter, whose live stream had first exposed the corruption. His posture remained straight, hands folded calmly in his lap. The same patience that had allowed him to outlast his opponents now steadied him for their final reckoning. Sheriff Dalton Kearns entered first, shackled and wearing orange prison garb that stripped away his former authority. His trademark swagger had vanished, replaced by shuffling steps. Behind him came Brent Hollis, pale and sweating, followed by Harold Pike, who still managed to look indignant, despite his circumstances. "All rise," the bailiff called, as Judge Marina Thompson entered, her black robes sweeping behind her. The sentencing began with Kearns. The prosecutor detailed 27 separate civil rights violations, conspiracy charges, and documented cases of evidence tampering. Previous victims stood one by one, describing lost homes and destroyed livelihoods. Their voices trembled with emotion, but rang with dignity. "Would the defendant like to make a statement before sentencing?" Judge Thompson asked. Kearns rose slowly, chains clinking. "Your Honor, I served this county for 30 years. "You exploited this county for 30 years, Judge Thompson cut in sharply. "Let's be precise with our language." A murmur of approval rippled through the gallery. Kearns's face reddened, but he pressed on. "I maintain that my actions were within legal bounds and—" The jury disagreed, Judge Thompson interrupted again. "Rather decisively, I might add." She lifted a thick stack of documents. "I have here impact statements from 17 families whose lands were illegally seized under your direction. I have evidence of kickbacks totaling over $2 million. I have GPS logs placing your deputies at multiple arson sites." She peered at him over her reading glasses. "Would you like to try that statement again?" Kearns deflated visibly. "No, Your Honor." "Very well." She straightened in her chair. "Dalton Kearns, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 18 years. You are permanently barred from holding any public office or law enforcement position." Brent Hollis received 15 years for his role in evidence planting and arson. He broke down sobbing when the judge detailed his crimes, but no one in the gallery showed sympathy. Harold Pike's carefully crafted political persona crumbled as he was sentenced to 12 years for conspiracy and fraud. The most dramatic moment came during the reading of financial penalties. Judge Thompson ordered Magnolia Crest Development Group's complete dissolution, with all assets frozen for victim restitution. The company's CEO slumped in his seat as she detailed how their mineral rights surveys would be used as evidence in upcoming civil suits. "Furthermore," Judge Thompson continued, "I am ordering the immediate termination of 7 additional deputies identified in this conspiracy. They are permanently barred from future law enforcement employment, with their certification records marked accordingly. Outside, during a recess, tensions finally boiled over. A former deputy, red-faced with rage, shoved a young protester holding a "Black Farms Matter" sign. The protester's friends surged forward as the ex-deputy swung wildly, landing a glancing blow before courthouse security officers swarmed in. They pinned him against the concrete steps, his furious struggles accomplishing nothing but scraping his expensive suit. "You see that?" Ruth Ann remarked to Elijah as they watched from the courthouse doors. "Last gasp of the old guard." Elijah nodded silently, recognizing the symbolic shift. The federal oversight team was already implementing reforms. Independent review boards for all police actions, transparent land zoning processes, regular audits of property seizures. The system that had protected corruption for decades was being dismantled piece by piece. The final phase came with Elijah's civil lawsuit settlement. His attorney presented extensive documentation of wrongful arrest, destroyed crops, killed livestock, and emotional distress. The resulting figure made headlines across the state. In the courthouse conference room, Elijah reviewed the settlement documents carefully. The numbers were substantial, enough to rebuild his farm 10 times over, enough to establish a legal defense fund for other threatened landowners, enough to ensure no one would target his property again. But as he lifted the pen to sign, his expression remained solemn. This wasn't about money. It was about accountability, about forcing change through the very legal system that had once been weaponized against him. Each signature represented not just compensation, but reformation, the death of old corruption and birth of new oversight. The final page required 3 signatures. Elijah completed them with steady hands, then set the pen down deliberately. He sat back in his chair, drawing in a deep breath that felt different from all those that had come before. The weight of constant vigilance, of necessary paranoia, began to lift from his shoulders. For the first time since Loretta's death, he could breathe freely. His land was secure. The corrupted power structure lay in ruins. Justice, slow but inexorable, had finally arrived. Morning mist clung to the red Georgia soil as the sun crept above the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Elijah Boone stood in his newly replanted fields, the rich earth beneath his boots still damp with dew. Beside him, Ruth Ann Carter adjusted her worn denim jacket against the morning chill, while Naomi Price held her ever-present notebook, though today it remained closed. The transformation of the farm was remarkable. Where deputies had once trampled crops and torn down fences, neat rows of corn and soybeans now stretched toward the brightening sky. The livestock pens had been rebuilt stronger than before, filled with healthy cattle and goats grazing peacefully in the early light. "Hard to believe it's the same place," Ruth Ann said, gesturing toward the restored barn. Its fresh red paint gleamed in the dawn light. Security cameras now mounted openly on each corner, not as weapons, but as shields against future intrusion. "Not the same place," Elijah replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had seen him through the darkest days. "It's better." Naomi nodded, surveying the property with experienced eyes. "The surveillance systems fully operational, legal, and logged with the Federal Oversight Committee," Elijah confirmed. "Everything's monitored and backed up off-site. No one can touch this place without the world watching." He led them toward a gathering of folding chairs set up near the farmhouse. Community members were arriving, local farmers, civil rights activists, and families who'd lost land in previous years. They came bearing covered dishes and thermoses of coffee, creating an atmosphere more like a church social than a formal ceremony. "I've finished reviewing the paperwork for the Boone Agricultural Justice Fund," Naomi said, falling into step beside him. "The structure's solid. It'll provide legal representation to any black landowner facing harassment or unlawful seizure attempts." "Loretta would have loved that," Ruth Ann added softly. Elijah's expression softened at his late wife's name. "She always said we needed to protect more than just our own piece of ground." A familiar truck pulled up the driveway, and Kyle Mercer stepped out, now dressed in civilian clothes. He'd left the sheriff's department, choosing instead to work with federal investigators while pursuing advanced training in law enforcement ethics. His shoulders tensed slightly as he approached, clearly uncertain of his welcome. "Mr. Boone," he said, extending his hand. "I wanted to come by personally, to apologize formally for my part in what happened. I should have spoken up sooner." Elijah studied him for a moment before accepting the handshake. "You spoke up when it mattered most. That's what counts." "I'm scheduled to testify next month in the civil rights case against Madison County," Kyle added. "They've been running the same kind of scheme over there." "Good," Elijah nodded. "Truth needs witnesses." More vehicles arrived, bringing neighbors and supporters who'd stood with him during the siege. They set up tables with food and drinks, creating an impromptu celebration of resilience. Children ran playing between the chairs while their parents shared stories of resistance and recovery. Near the farmhouse steps, a small memorial had been arranged, a framed photo of Loretta Boone, surrounded by fresh flowers. Her warm smile seemed to oversee the gathering, just as she'd watched over the farm in life. Elijah knelt in the fresh-tilled soil nearby, letting dark earth sift through his fingers. He remembered Loretta's voice the day he'd left the Navy, angry and bitter at the corruption he'd witnessed. "Patience beats rage," she'd told him. "Plant justice like seeds, tend it careful, let it grow strong roots." The wisdom of her words had guided his every move during the confrontation with Kearns and his deputies. Not one shot fired, not one life taken. Yet the corrupt system had fallen, toppled by truth and tenacity rather than violence. Around him, the farm hummed with new life. Chickens scratched in their rebuilt coop where armored vehicles had once parked. The irrigation system, repaired and expanded, sparkled with morning light. Even the old oak tree that had witnessed the initial siege seemed to stand taller, its leaves dancing in the gentle breeze. Ruth Ann touched his shoulder gently. Time for the ceremony. The gathered community formed a circle around Loretta's memorial. Local ministers offered prayers, activists spoke of continued vigilance, and farmers shared wisdom about protecting the land. Elijah listened, watching sunlight stretch across his fields that now represented not just agricultural success, but a victory for justice itself. A young girl presented him with a hand-drawn picture of the farm, complete with stick figures standing proud against cartoon police cars. "My mama says you showed them they can't push us around no more," she said solemnly. Elijah accepted the drawing with equal gravity. "That's right. But remember, we won because we used the law, not force. We won because we stood together." The morning continued to brighten, burning away the last of the mist. Where once 50 deputies had surrounded his land with hatred and greed, now stood friends and allies unified in purpose. The fields stretched open and free, crops reaching skyward, livestock grazing undisturbed. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.